Annabella's finally here. Let's go over her kit, rotation, and the value of her advancements and matrices. Annabella has two playstyles, selected with her skill, burn and gas. Selecting your bullet enhances your next 8 dodges, and adds an effect that refunds 1 dodge every 2 dodges, up to 4 in total. However, do note that these effects are lost upon swapping out. When on burn, each dodge applies a 13-second burn and grants a buff that increases all of your burn damage. On gas, each dodge will create and instantly detonate gas, doing high damage and reducing enemy resistance. Technically, these effects are on cross-snipe and skill with how long you charge it, but since the dodge attack automatically shoots a fully charged cross-snipe, there is no reason to ever scope in outside of roleplay purposes. Note that the resistance shred on gas does not increase your damage by as much as you'd imagine. In fact, most mobs don't even have resist, including all mobs in joint ops as well as the cactus. And yes, that means that not even the text, "the enemy resists 65% damage," implies true resistance. Some forms of content that do have resistance include raids and void abyss bosses, where this resistance shred will increase your damage by about 2%. The dodge attack is the only useful DPS tool in her kit. The damage of all her basic skills pales in comparison. Furthermore, the DPS of her dodge varies immensely between burn and gas, with gas doing higher DPS and burn doing, well, burn. Let's look at the value of Annabella's advancements. Her A1 creates a slowing field on enemies every 2 charge shots that lasts for 12 seconds. However, the wording on the other effect is a bit tricky to understand. Basically, detonations have an internal cooldown of 6 seconds, regardless of source. The only thing this field does is make it so when a burn is detonated within the field, it will automatically detonate up to 2 more times at the regular intervals, as if you were bouncing your Rubik's Cube around. It even works if the burn is refreshed outside of the field. That is, that it doesn't give you any more detonations than what is normally possible. All it does is secure your next 2 detonations, so that when Ruby decides to fly to Africa, you still get your detonations in.
NANI?
As such, this advancement isn't worth too much damage and is purely for utility. Her A3 increases the passive crit gain slightly, and also adds a lifesteal effect. As Flame doesn't have any sustain currently, this is a valuable advancement for survival, while providing a little bit of damage. While the A5 on paper looks pretty good, it's mainly good for burn comps. The 30% ignore resist on gas only applies to a small amount of her total damage, and ignoring 30% resist doesn't mean much when most content doesn't even have resist, and in those that do, you're only going to be gaining a little bit of overall damage. A6 increases the damage of her cross snipe, which is only a very small amount of her total damage, especially when running burn, as in burn you don't spam her dodge attack like you do in gas. Overall, the difference in total team power between A0 and A6 is the smallest we've seen so far, as most of her advancements are just for utility or waifu purposes. Annabella's matrix is very interesting in that it somewhat works as both a support and an on-field matrix. On-field, it has a dodge refreshing effect that will make the gas rotation much smoother, while also giving buffs to both crit and final damage. These buffs will carry over to other weapons, except the 10% final damage on the 4-piece. This makes it very similar in power to Ruby's matrix in the offhand, being better at 0-star, but worse at 3-star. As an on-field matrix, it does beat out Samir and Shiro or Krull, but it comes pretty close to Samir and Tsubasa, assuming you can keep Tsubasa's matrix up. It's also not as good as Cobalt's 4-piece, which provides good damage on top of burns, while still having that extra dodge to smooth out the rotation. Speaking of rotation, let's dive into it! Let's start out with gas. The rotation is fairly simple. Start out on Lyn and drop Moonlight Realm, followed by putting out Ruby's skill. Edit, I forgot to do this, but stack up your heat on Ruby before swapping out. Switch to Annabella, select your bullet as fast as possible while auto-attacking to keep busy, and then start using your dodge attacks. If you don't have a dodge refreshing matrix, you will only have enough dodges to do 7 in a row, at which point you discharge the Ruby before swapping to Lyn to maintain Lyn matrix stacks if applicable. Then rinse and repeat. Gas has a quota reduction effect for other flame weapons when spamming dodges, so even if your Ruby is lower advancement, Ruby's skill will typically be up after each Annabella rotation. For burn, there is one main difference. Using Ruby as main DPS is typically stronger, so you would only use 2 dodge attacks on Annabella to put up the burn and the A1 field, and then proceed to DPS on Ruby. However, when using Cobalt's matrix, main DPSing on Annabella, similar to gas, can be equally effective. The generic team comp will consist of Ruby, Lyn, and Annabella. But what alternatives are there? Especially if you don't have A3 Ruby or higher, it's really not worth running burn over gas. You can consider a rainbow comp, where you run Claudia or even Tsubasa in place of Ruby. If you're using Lyn, you don't lose much from the mediocre Flame Moonlight Realm, and you get your Resonance attack back in the balanced Moonlight Realm. Claudia is arguably a lot more fluid to play in a gas comp than Ruby, especially if you have Ruby's matrix, as she can stack it up extremely fast. How is Flame as an element with Annabella? The overall damage potential is increased over Cobalt, but not as much as you might imagine. However, unlike with Cobalt, you don't need advancements to get the bulk of Annabella's power, making decent fire DPS very accessible. When compared to other elements, though, it leaves something to be desired. Here's a table of the estimated damage per minute percent of various maxed out team comps on both the Cactus as well as a practical scenario. Note that these values exclude team-wide effects such as Grievous, as in a team setting, everyone benefits from it. But in a solo setting, these physical numbers may get an additional edge. A maxed out Cobalt team is around 90% of the potential of an Annabella team, which comes very close to the current Frost setup, but still shy of that of both physical and vault. However, Annabella can see up to a 5% relative increase in value when fighting content that has natural resistance to it, such as Void Abyss and Raids. While Annabella doesn't raise the ceiling for flame damage by much, she raises the floor by a lot. Most of her power is packed into the core of her kit, with advancements being only utility or a small amount of damage. Her matrices are versatile and can be used both on and off field, though if you already have both Cobalt and Ruby matrices, it's a questionable investment. As she is now, she doesn't power creep fire by as much as many had hoped, but she does make it a lot more consistent and accessible to play. She's also pretty cute. As always, calculations can be found in my DPS calculator, link in the description. See you guys next time!